So if we imagine ourselves on a spiritual journey or on the spiritual path, then we must be going from someplace to someplace else, right? And that's what a journey is all about. So the only question is, where are we now and where do we think we're going? And we might have some idea about that. We might just frame it broadly, I'm just in search of peace or happiness, or maybe a little more ambitiously, I just want to get enlightened. I just want to wake up spiritually. I want to know God, however you frame it. Okay, good. But exactly what is that? And what is absent now that we hope to find then? And when we start to get specific about the questions, that's when we begin to realize that we're not both quite sure where we are now, and we may think we know where we want to go. Let's just call it spiritual enlightenment. The only problem is you can't know what spiritual enlightenment is until it's recognized, because any idea that we have about it won't be it. Nobody ever wakes up and says, yeah, that's pretty much what I thought it was going to be. No, that's not what happens. It's just a surprise. So where we think we're going is not, won't ever be it. That's part of the challenge of what we imagine a spiritual journey to be. But the thing is, we might be motivated to commit large swaths of our life energy in the pursuit of this. So it's good to be clear about where we think we are now, what we believe is lacking now, and what we hope to find at some future point. The only problem is that some future point never happens except in the present moment. So the only place that we will ever find a sense of fulfillment, abiding peace and happiness, will be in the present moment. It won't be found in the future. Can't be, because we never get to the future. The future is some imagined projection of where we think things will turn out better at some later point. So here's the dilemma. The dilemma is that, now, this present moment, as I feel like I am now, doesn't satisfy. There's something, it can feel like there's something missing. And therefore, just to, tell me that I should be okay with the present moment doesn't quite cut it. So there's this sense of dissatisfaction with the present moment. There can be, often is. So this is a tricky ground, because if we say, just be satisfied with the present moment. There are people that are pretty happy with the present moment and fast asleep in terms of, personal understanding, let's say. So the interesting thing is that people that are, contented, fully contented with the present moment, are either fast asleep or fully awake. But we can't, it seems like we can't recognize that without some degree of dissatisfaction in the present moment. Sometimes it's been called divine discontent, right? Discontent with the present moment that sort of nudges us forward, nudges us past our comfort level, nudges us into questioning things that that may be uncomfortable to question. Right? So this discontent does play a role to push us out of complacency, let's say, into really questioning what this is about. Because we can spend a lot of energy, reading books, going to retreats, sitting in meditation, working on our diet, trying to fix our karma, trying to do good deeds. We can spend a lot of energy doing all of this. But the one thing that we seem to avoid doing, almost unless we're forced into it, is to question our fundamental beliefs. But what really opens us to this journey to recognize what's already present is questioning our beliefs, including beliefs that we may not imagine are even negotiable, that we may not even know that we're functioning from. But beliefs are sort of like the software that we've accumulated over the course of the lifetime. A lot of it may be functional, but there may be some bugs in there, certain software routines that cause us or other people to suffer, to pull us back into contraction. Those belief systems can even sound quite noble. Like I just want the world to, be at peace, and I know what that should look like, and if only other people did it, and we're nicer to each other, I know that everything would work out and I would be happy. But that is putting the burden on other people, basically. That as long as they come around, they do the hard work, the world will be a better place, then I'll be happy. So we can see that there's some degree of self motivation in that. But what you may notice is that the world isn't that susceptible to what we want it to be. Where we can have some degree of influence is in our own way we view the world. And we view it through this filter of beliefs accumulated over a course of a lifetime. They're like almost like a visual veil, a filter through which we see life, through which we interpret life. So we believe that all of us are looking at the same material world and just drawing different conclusions from it. But actually, we're all looking at our own individual world that's colored by our beliefs. We're not denying the existence of an external world, but how that's actually experienced is through the filter of our beliefs and past experiences and traumas and ideas and ways we believe that other people in the world should be. So one of the requirements, you would think on a spiritual journey that an appropriate question would be, how do I find God? How do I get enlightened? But that's actually not a very useful question. The reason it's not that useful is that because the answer to that can only be conceptual, right? Because what we're talking about then is the entirety, right? So if we're talking about the entirety, it can't be a concept about anything. And if we're talking about the entirety, it can't be reduced to an idea or a technique or a truism. It's much, much vaster than that. And so it's not actually helpful, although it sounds like it would be helpful. Like, okay, how do I get enlightened? Well, the more useful question is, if what I'm seeking must be present now. If what I'm seeking is essential to my beingness, if it were absent even for a moment, well, I'd just cease to exist, right? So it must be present now. I mean, the sages, throughout history have pointed to the same thing. Jesus talked about the kingdom of heaven being spread upon the earth, and men don't see it. So if what we're looking for is present now, the better question is, what am I believing? What am I telling myself that's obscuring that which is always present? That's a much better question. What am I believing about myself? Well, there's lots of things we can believe. We can believe that, well, I'm not worthy, right? I have to earn my right to be, well, here. I have to earn my right to be human, to be alive, to share in this creation. And somehow I've been told that I'm not enough, whether by preachers or parents or teachers or past boyfriends, girlfriends. That somehow I need to do something to earn my right to be here. I have to fix my karma. I have to change my habits. I have to have the right diet. I have to have the right set of beliefs. So all of that is putting obstacles between wherever I am now and wherever I imagine that I will hopefully get to at some future point. And if I play my cards right and work hard and do all the right things, then maybe I'll be eligible. Right? I mean, that's a lot of what spirituality is based on, the hope for future attainment. So the only question is any of that true? To the thinking mind, it makes sense. Yeah. I mean, no pain, no gain. If I don't work my way from unworthy to worthy, that's going to take some time and effort. And, I'm willing to devote the next 20 years, but, I'm willing to do that. Right? So the only thing that's not questioned is that actually true? And so it's much more useful, before we start off on a certain path, based on a certain assumption about what's necessary, is to really question what it is that we're believing in this present moment is lacking. Because that's really what motivates this journey, this spiritual journey. Something lacking now that I will hopefully have access to at some later point, somehow be worthy of at some later point. So the question is, what exactly is lacking now? And the mind will offer answers to that, all of which will be false, but convincing, very convincing. So the paradox is that even though we may discover that none of those obstacles are actually true, it may take a lot of effort to find that out. It's like the old Zen concept of the gateless gate. From one side, it appears like an impenetrable gate, big gate, solid gate, locked gate that we're trying to press our way through. On this side, unworthiness, on that side, enlightenment. And I just have to, through merit, get through that gate. And then, let's say one day we finally find ourselves on the other side of the gate. We look back and we realize there never was a gate. But it's not that that effort was not required. Right? That's the paradox of it. It needed that effort to find out that the effort wasn't actually required. So in retrospect, we can see it was all necessary. It may have seemed like a long and winding road, but it was all necessary somehow. We can see that in retrospect. At the time going through it, it can often feel like finding our way in the dark, where all we know is the next step. But the good news is all we need to know is the next step. We don't need to know what the whole journey looks like. For one thing, we can't know. We can't know how it's all going to unfold. For one thing, it's going to be unique for everybody, so nobody else can tell you how that's going to unfold for you. And if we try to imagine or project, how the whole journey is going to unfold, hopefully we can see that can only be conceptual. Right? It's just imagination. Right? I've read about it. I've heard about it. Someone else's miraculous cosmic explosion of consciousness. That's what I want. And we think anything other than that is not it. But everybody's unfolding will be unique. It may be quiet. It may be explosive. It may be almost hardly discernible, except in looking back, and we can see that what we are is not at all like what we thought we were just a few years ago. So it can be very quiet unfolding like that. But what we can do is recognize that we only need to know what the next step is. And the next step is often what has energy for us, right? What we're most curious about, what we're most excited about, what gives us juice, what gives us a sense of wonder, sense of challenge, that kind of energy. It's not a mental thing. It comes from a deeper place than that. Just what really gives us joy in discovering, questioning, that kind of energy, and that will inform us. And it may not feel spiritual. It may feel very much out in the world, and that may be what's required next. We can't say. We can't say that that's worldly and this is spiritual over here. It's not like that. It's all grist for the mill, all of it. And often the most challenging conditioning to see through in ourselves is the ones that we can't just meditate our way through. Sometimes we just have to live it. And that can take some time. Because what we're talking about are things that are subtle enough that we don't actually recognize it as conditioning. It feels more like, it's just who I am. It just feels not software. It feels like hardware. It feels like something that's hardwired in what I am. And hey, I just got to live with it. So we're not talking about, doing away with all conditioning. It's really understanding the conditioning and how it operates. We can't let go or transcend something that we don't understand. So our job is, rather than trying to gain enlightenment, it's really to more deeply understand how and when we're pulled back into contraction. What thoughts hook us? That we can do. So it's good to remember that any spiritual teaching is really for a particular point in the so-called journey. So, for example, in Buddhism, there's a saying, a story that, once they talk about crossing from this bank to the far shore, and crossing the river is, the period of, our spiritual journey. And then we find ourselves on the other shore, in other words, liberated. And the point of the story is that don't continue to carry the boat on your head on the far shore. Okay, a valid teaching. So once the the teaching and the practice and everything has led to a result of seeing what the teaching was pointing to, it's not, to continue to hold tight to that teaching is no longer not only necessary, but also can get in the way, can hold us back in some ways to go further. Sort of like climbing up a ladder. To go further, you have to let go of the rung below and let that be. Well, that's all a useful teaching for a particular point in the journey. But, just to read about that teaching when you're in the middle of the river and say, well, heck, I don't need this boat, it wouldn't be appropriate, right? So the teaching is good for all teachings for a particular point. So one of the other things I wanted to just touch on briefly is that we may have heard the teaching that it's good to be without preferences. Well, that's nice. I mean, until we actually try to do it, right? To try to function and not have preferences for things being this way or that way, and we can do it on small things, but on things that significantly affect our lives, we don't want to do that. We want things as we want them to be. So to hear a teaching like that, and as a strategy to get enlightened, if I just could drop my preferences, then I could get enlightened. That's one of the things that I have to do to get enlightened. That becomes another obstacle. What the teaching actually is meant to point to is, once we recognize what we truly are, as this spaciousness, as this sort of core subjectivity that is more primary than this body-mind. Once we recognize that our true home, our true identity is that, then sort of material things and, people's opinions about us and, what kind of ice cream we're happy with or not. I mean, those kind of things, those kind of preferences just don't carry that much weight anymore. It's not that they don't exist, but they don't exert the same kind of gravitational pull that they once did. So it's something that is true after we recognize what we truly are, and then the preferences tend to subside. And there's one of the preferences that we have that's sort of natural to have is that I prefer bliss. That's what I want. Not only do I want it all the time, and I want a heightened state of bliss. That's what I want. And that's what I've heard enlightenment is, so that's what I want. And if it's not a heightened state of bliss all the time, it can't be enlightenment. That's the storyline. The only problem is that it's not true. Bliss is possible. Even the heightened state of bliss is possible. It's just the permanent state of bliss that's not. And deep down we know this. It's just sort of a personal preference. personal hope, a personal ambition that what I want is something that feels really, really good. And I want it continuously, perpetual bliss. It's just not possible. I mean, we may experience bliss. I mean, there may be an extended period of, what could reasonably be called bliss after recognition of what we truly are. That may happen. But it will subside into what I would call contentment. Now, contentment may not be a sufficient motivator to devote 20 years of your life to, but that's what it subsides to, where there is a sort of a very profound sense of okayness about what's happening. It doesn't mean that we like everything. Doesn't mean that we agree with everything. Doesn't mean that we like, to spend our time with just anybody. Doesn't mean any of that. But it means that if that's what's happening, then it's okay. So there's this sense of abiding okayness. That's possible. And that's actually very nice too. But abiding high-level, high-state bliss. Bliss is a state. It's a state like sadness or depression or anger or joy or hope or jealousy or regret. I mean, all of these are just states of feeling, states of mind. And we all know that these come and go. They have a certain duration. They might be fill us for a while, depending on circumstances, and then at some point subside in favor of another state. The awakeness is what's aware of whatever state happens to be. It's not a particular state. It's a mistake that many spiritual seekers make. It's not a particular state. It's a sense of a deep, profound sense of okayness when the mind's confused, when there's a sense of joy present, where then there's a sense of grief, when there's a sense of quiet, peace. It flows. When we're not demanding it to look a certain way, there's a relaxation. The relaxation is the liberation. And that doesn't demand anything that needs time. It's just a recognition of what's already present. Like we did in the opening little investigation into our immediate nature. We can find that this awareness is already present, it's already quiet, already at peace. And yes, there may be thoughts happening. Yes, there may be sounds happening. Yes, the body's doing whatever it does. Fine. And yet, it's all happening. It's all happening as an appearance, a beautiful, amazing, extraordinary appearance within this capacity of awareness, this ultimate subjectivity, this ultimate sense of being here, present for whatever's happening. And we don't need to wait. We don't need to wait. It's not dependent on circumstances. It's not dependent on having any particular experience. It's dependent on recognizing what's already present. Simple.